All right, we are back for another episode of the Marketing Operators. I heard that Connor McDonald's in Vegas right now and that they're about to double Ridge's 2024 EBITDA on the craps table. So Connor might be on a beach in somewhere warm after this week he's about to spend in Vegas.
So as you know, we all use Motion and they have been shipping a ton of cool new stuff. We wanted to talk through some of it. Classically, the first new feature I want to talk about is something that we were already doing manually internally. And that's basically been a lot of Motion's roadmap, is like figuring out what are creative strategists and the best brands doing manually in spreadsheets and in Figma and things like that, and how can they automate it and improve it. And a great new example of that is Creative Highlights. It's a weekly creative leaderboard, kind of like a Billboard top 10 chart of what's working in your ad accounts. We've been doing this historically. We'd say every week we'd send it out to the whole team. This is what's working. These are the ads that are new to working, and these are the ads that were previous winners and are continuing to work. So the fact that this is automated is really nice. As a pro tip, we start a lot of meetings this way. So if you're ahead of growth, you don't need to prep. You can just immediately pull in Creative Highlights to understand what's best performing. Some of the other new features that I've been excited about, there's a LinkedIn ads integration. So for the B2B marketers listening, you can check that out. And lastly, we've been looking at winning combinations. This is an advanced feature that lets you more easily extract big insights from all your creative testing variables. And there's a related new feature called naming conventions. One of my favorite things, we haven't dug in here, but obviously this is in my wheelhouse. It automatically groups ads in comparative reports and just helps you get those bigger insights with way less manual effort. So if you're ready to learn how the best D2C and e-commerce brands use Motion to ship winning Meta, TikTok, and YouTube ads, book a demo today or create a free account at motionapp.com. And remember, if you mention Marketing Operators Podcast to Motion Sales Team, you can get 50% off your first month.
Before we get into it, we have part 2 of 2 on hiring today. There's a new channel that I guess not necessarily a new channel, but new way to go about a channel, new marketplace for an existing performance marketing channel called Agenteo. Cody is early in the game on Agenteo. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, what its USP is, what Cody's initial experience is. So yeah, Cody, I wanted to kick it your way and just give us the download on what Agenteo is and if you're bullish or bearish on it.
Yeah, so we've talked about it a few times past episodes, but I'm pumped on it. It's essentially a way to automate YouTube, creator sponsorships. We have never done up until now we've done like almost no paid influencer. So we are starting. It's a big initiative for us this year. Help us reach some new audiences. So we are doing a lot on Instagram, just kind of some influencer stuff, but then we're also doing a lot of YouTube. And I know this is something that Ridge has done a ton of. So definitely have learned from Connor over the years. But Agenteo automates it. So like I wouldn't have known how to do it, like with our current team and whatnot. So the really cool thing, they have like a lot of cool AI stuff where it kind of just like makes it look almost like you're setting up a meta campaign, but you set up your budget and all that kind of stuff. And it recommends creators. I don't know how much of this is like AI driven, how much of it is like manual in the back end. I think it's some combo of both. And so you can see all of their stats and platform. You can see what like the CPM would be, and you can adjust your CPM that you want to bid. And it just kind of limits a lot of the back and forth. I would have to, have a whole team just manually going and messaging people and negotiating back and forth. You get to see all of the ads people have done, who has performed for other brands, who hasn't. There's a lot of cool data. You could see if they're like in the top 10% of engagement rate or an ad view through rate. So a lot of really cool stuff. It's using a lot of like AI and LLMs to be able to like say like, hey, based on your other creators that have performed well, this is, this person is similar or this person is similar to this creator. So it's really just trying to automate it, bring a lot of AI to that like manual research outreach process. And then it makes it really easy just all within the app to be like, all right, bid submitted. I want to spend $50K this month. So I'm going to submit $150K worth of bids because not all of them will be accepted. People accept or you don't. You can just do everything through the app. So it just really automates this very manual process of YouTube creator partnerships. It's very possible. A lot of teams like Ridge and a lot of other really successful brands do it and have done it for years without it. But I thought it was just a cool, helpful tool. And the team has been great. Everybody I've talked to that works with them really likes their team to be able to kind of automate it. So there's a little bit more, like it automates UTMs, it automates code usage. So like just tries to speed it up. There's a little bit more like advice that they give that I think has been really helpful for us launching. I got it from a few other brands as well, but I'm pumped. So our first video went live yesterday. We're going to go 50K a month over 3 months was kind of the recommended minimum. It's probably one of those things where you don't really know on day one how this channel is going to perform. Let's say that budget is probably split amongst 10, 12 creators per month of all different sizes, probably from like $700 per video all the way up to probably like 15K per video. So a bunch of different ones. But yeah, our first one went live yesterday. Pumped about it. It's funny because I refreshed my dashboard probably as much as I do on like Black Friday. It's like whenever you launch a new channel, I'm super excited about this. I would say I'm 60% bullish. I think this could work for us. The only downside would be like in beauty, you pay pretty high CPMs. At first, I wasn't sure how we were going to track this. After a day, I already feel pretty good about it. Like we're looking at code usage. So, but yeah, I'm just like 60% confident if it'll work or not. We are looking at, so like UTMs via Northbeam and Shopify, but UTMs, code usage, and then post-purchase, survey data. And we actually got them integrated into Prescient, our MMM. And so that there's like a beta where we'd be the second client using it. So that is something that I'm excited about. We don't like to discount. So we're doing a GWP for ours. We Aftersell actually like built us a custom beta thing that actually allows a code to do a GWP. So here's where we're at so far. The video went live about 24 hours ago. We spent $4,300 on it. All right, that was per this video. We have, as of this morning, 5 UTM purchases. So not a lot. We have 23 codes used. So I am surprised at that discrepancy. I thought it would be like a 2-to-1, but 23 codes used, $100 AOV. So that's like 2,300. So we're at like a 0.55 ROAS on like a code usage. And then if we look at post-purchase survey, we have 2 things in there. If one of the questions, how did you hear about us, is YouTube creator. If they say YouTube creator, we ask them which creator. We're probably at 8 purchases there based on this creator. And then also you have to factor in, and Connor, I have a lot of questions for you guys, Ridge, but like, let's say half the people took your survey. Do you double that or not? And then we also ask influencer, because some people will say creator, some people will say influencer. Then we say which influencer. So if you add those 2 up, we're probably at like 16 in there. So 16 in post-purchase, and that's not like doubling it up because not everybody's going to take it. 23 codes. And what I don't know, and Connor, I want your opinion, but like, I feel like a 0.5 after a day, pretty much 24 hours is pretty good because I think we'll get a lot of long tail. And so maybe after 14 days or 30 days, this might go to like a positive payback. But that's where we're at, and I'm super pumped about it.
So it sounds like you're looking at it as a performance channel, so which makes sense. What does winning look like? Like you're obviously backing into like a discount code based like CPA and then like return on ad spend. Are you then going to say like, okay, our return on ad spend on this channel was like based on the discount code was like a 1x. We're going to go and look at like Northbeam at like maybe another top of like maybe like paid Facebook or something and say, all right, well, paid Facebook's at a 0.75x L30. This is at a 1x. Like this is marginally more efficient. Thus, we should scale it. Like, is that the type of thinking that's going into it, or how are you? Like, what does winning look like?
Yeah, I'm hoping this is a little bit newer audience, higher funnel, more like a YouTube or a TV for us. So, can we feed new reach, new signals into Meta? Hopefully, that's one. Number 2, so yeah, like I would have expected, like we run YouTube at like a 0.4 on a 1-day click in Northbeam, because it's new audiences, more new, versus like Meta is like way better than that. So I'd probably like consider it there from a starting point.
Yeah, look at paid YouTube 1-day click ROAS is like the number one control metric you're comparing to.
At least same channel. I don't know if I like programmatic ads versus creator partnerships is biasing more to new versus not. It also might depend, but that's like the main thing, not like a number, but like how are we reaching new audiences? and obviously taking advantage of, how strong people relate to creators. It was really interesting because this woman yesterday did a video, an organic review of us like 2 years ago, did not like it. Tried it again when we offered to sponsor it. She liked it. But there are people in the comments like, hey, I wrote it off 2 years ago. I wasn't interested. Now I'm super interested. It's like, it is wild. And Ridge, you guys know this. It is wild how much people just trust their favorite creators.
They're influenced. Yeah. Highly influential people.
That's why they call it that.
Yeah. I'll say, one, what was it? Do you know the CPM that you paid for the spot?
About 50.
Yeah. That's like what I've heard. And that's why I'm super curious to see how it shakes out for you guys. But like beauty, health, just like crazy, 30, 40, 50, like I've heard much higher. I mean, our typical CPMs like under 15 from YouTube.
What are your meta CPMs though?
10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're at like a $30 meta CPM, if that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. No, it's all relative. So I guess that's, ends up being like basically the same premium that we see. For what it's worth, we track like a 0.4 to 0.5 is what we consider winning within Northbeam from YouTube creators. I don't do much triangulating with codes anymore. I always worry they leak, and like we've sponsored so many creators for so long, it just ends up being like a really blurry metric. We'll look at kind of expansions and contractions in like YouTube as a response in our post-purchase survey. So those are the two that I like. And then the last thing that I'll say is like, I just think the impressions are so much more impactful than like even a pre-roll YouTube ad that you're running out of Google ads is obviously great. And you guys see like a really high incrementality factor on that. You're serving a lot of impressions like that all makes total sense. But the people who are like, oh, they hear from a creator they really respect that Jones Road is good, like that really sticks with you. So I think I hope you guys figure it out. And we tend to just be generous with the measurement of that because I think we're creating a lot of longer term value. Like I said, really, really memorable impressions.
So you think of it more as a macro over this quarter. This is what we spent. Here's maybe some type of revenue, and then there's probably a pretty substantial halo effect that is not measured. Is that kind of fair?
Yeah, totally. And even the fact that like we talked about it over the weekend because you were asking how we like amortize costs over time. And I mean, many of these YouTube videos will get views forever. Like, so it's really hard to like actually attribute costs. We are pretty conservative. I told you over the weekend, like we book all the costs basically on the day the video goes live. Sometimes we'll spread it out over like 2 or 3 or 4 days, but we're never like amortizing it over 30 days or something. And then, we just get that long tail benefit of the views over time.
That's what I heard. That's what I've heard. And I think I'll caveat this with saying like, I think it's also a portfolio strategy. It's like everybody I've talked to, it's like if you do 10 videos, you might get like 2 or 3 that tank, a few that do okay, and then like 2 that crush it and carry it for the whole thing. So I'll caveat with that, but like that's why I feel pretty good that like after today we'll probably be at like a 0.5, 0.6 on like code redemption, maybe even better. So I think we'll break even in the first week, and then I think it'll kind of be like pure profit stacked over that. And my guess is at day 30, like we might be at like a 1.5 on a code redemption basis, which I'd be like, I'd kill for that. Like I think that would be great. Totally. That's my goal. I will update, but that's my expectation of the channel.
How do you feel about like we everything we do in a discount code leaks immediately? How are they? A, is that a problem for you? And B, if it is, are they doing like any sort of unique discount code per person type deal to make that less of a problem? Or what's going on with are you worried about that? Is there anything Agenteo is doing to solve that problem?
Not that I know of. I'm not super worried because we're doing gift with purchase codes. I feel like that's a lot less attractive than a true discount code. Anything we do with a discount code basis, it's just a strict usage limit. So that's probably what I would do, and just cap it and monitor it and maybe go up as we do it, or maybe have them switch it out. But I'll cross that when we get to it. I think gift with purchase, I'm not as worried about it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. The mechanics of that are, because like if you have like a 15% off code, Honey or Capital One Shopping or whoever can just straight up inject that to any cart. But if you have a gift with purchase discount code, you still have to actually like if you're doing the Miracle Balm and then the gift is on a very specific product, they still have to add that product to cart, right? To
No,
get that, or does it not
it gets
work that
automatically applied above the threshold.
Got it.
So
Got
there is
it.
a
Okay.
code, or well, I guess either it has to be a code or they have to come on that UTM link. So I guess it could. I just feel like it's less exciting for people to kind of go find it and less motivating to go with a gift with purchase versus like everyone's going to try to get the free discount code.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's why you have like the UTMs as well, right? If you're like, hey, we have 190 discount code usages, but only 25, UTM last click base and like the traffic number, like you should be able to cross reference and be like, all right, something's up here.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Sweet. All right. Well, that's fun. I'm excited to follow up in a few weeks and see how that video is maturing for you guys.
I will update you. Yeah, we'll have a bunch of them. So,
you know what I wanted to say before we move on is the custom, or not custom, but like being early to the integration with Prescient and having Aftercell custom build a feature for you to launch this new channel, Agenteo. You're really on the cutting edge here, Cody. It's just a very custom build out.
I'm trying. I appreciate all of our partners. Some of them happen to be sponsors. Appreciate them, but yeah, definitely helping build some stuff for us.
Amazing.
So we switched CX softwares right before Black Friday. Normally wouldn't be the best decision, but we were looking at Rich Panel, and it was just so much better than what we were using. Our contract was up, and honestly, I'm so happy we did. It was the first time ever that we made it through Black Friday and holiday period with no ticket backlog, and I really owe that to Rich Panel. First of all, it's cheaper. It's way less. We cut our costs compared to what we were paying before by 50%. It's the first AI CX platform I've seen that's really built with AI in mind. And we're not even fully maximizing what we can do with AI yet. So I can't wait to see how much more efficient we can be. But it's really the first one I've seen that's built in this new era of commerce and AI tech. It's, already being used by over 2,000 brands like us, like Ridge as well. One thing that's been really cool, we were able to leverage a lot of their automations and routing. So our average response time went way down when we switched to them. Our efficiency with AI went way up. We also just implemented their self-serve help desk, reduced our tickets by 30% without affecting anything. We're able to take care of 60% of those interactions without actually having to route them to a person. So obviously there's financial components to that have been really helpful. The team is great. I see our team going back and forth with the Rich Panel team all the time in Slack. They want feedback. They want feature requests. You're just not going to get that from some of the old legacy players. So it's going to be cheaper. You're going to have better use of AI that everyone's trying to catch up on. The UX is way better. The tagging is better. It has the best analytics suite of any of the CX tools I've used. So we're super happy. So if your help desk costs are too high, if you're not thrilled with your outdated software that is, you feel like is robbing you, I highly recommend you switch to Rich Panel. You can reduce cost, reduce ticket volume by 30%. And honestly, that's pretty conservative. Highly recommend you get a demo and see for yourself. Go to richpanel.com to check it out.
All right. Well, let's get into the bulk of this one. This is episode 2 of 2 on hiring. The previous episode, we talked more about how to know when to hire and just our thoughts on the different scenarios that can lead you to wanting to make an internal hire. We also talked a lot about org chart design and how to structure the org, both horizontally and vertically in a way that makes sense. And really interesting how that changes over time and how people's roles change over time and how, someone might have been the person to take you from, 1 to 5, but maybe it's not the person to take you from 5 to 8 and so on. So we are now going to transition into episode 2 of 2 on hiring, which is more so related to, all right, you have made the hire. Now, how do you get the most out of these people? How do you empower them to really come into your org and succeed? All right, before we get into episode 2 of 2 on hiring, I want to thank our sponsors, Motion, Prescient, Rich Panel, and House. All right, let's get into it. So I wanted to jump off with something that I've noticed over time. I'm curious if you guys have had the similar experience. I, in my head, am always distinguishing between the job description and the actual job. And I have seen friction here with a new hire when the person that's managing them isn't able to make that distinction. So the job description, right? Like this is an objective readout of like the roles and responsibilities that someone might be doing or will be doing if you hire them. And then you get into the actual job. And as the manager, like especially when someone is starting new, like it's up to you as the person that person reports into and the person that like has the vision for where this part of the org needs to go to like actually get in the weeds a little bit on the actual work up front to get that initial momentum going. And I found that sometimes that doesn't always happen. So you look like a JD. A JD might read, write briefs to produce paid media ad creative if you're hiring for a creative strategist. But then once that person starts, you need to actually like get into the initial momentum with them on what that actually means. So it's like, hey, here's the ads we want to produce. Here's the team you have to produce these things. Here's the budget you might have. And I found that if you're a manager hiring for a role that like you don't necessarily know all the nuance of like what that role entails when it comes to the day to day, that there can be some friction about like what, like, yes, you might know that you want that person to do something like theoretically, but if you don't have like a good enough like concrete grasp of how that comes together, I think things can go wrong early on. Have you ever had that experience or seen that, or like there's just some misalignment between like the actual job description and the manager's ability to actually like understand what that job actually entails and how to do it and like when to do it? Is that something you guys have noticed at all? Connor, you wanna kick it off?
Yeah, I think we've gotten significantly better at this over the last 2 years. But the issue years ago would be like, we bring on a director and we have like a general sense of like what I want to happen with that team, but then that person getting to actual traction is hard, or it's not happening fast enough, or they're unable to do it. Whereas, so that's definitely happened. It happened more years ago, and you end up just kind of like spinning your tires and being unhappy with the quality of work, or you're not producing all that much more than you were without this person. Like those were some of the issues we ran into previously. Now I think it's like we put more time and energy into the org chart, the workflows, and like the general objectives of this role. So you almost get like minimum viable responsibilities where I know this person's going to come in and like these are the things they for sure are going to be able to handle and are teed up to handle. And then growth in that role and further traction is for them to develop. And if they're going to be successful, then like that's where we see that's where we see their role develop. And I think some of those things are like undefined. Like we brought on a creative director and I was like, I want to increase our content funnel. We need to be producing more content. We need to be improving like design and we want to improve design cohesiveness. Those are the objective goals. We had a couple meetings attached to that, a couple dashboards attached to that. And then that's minimum viable responsibility. And then they have done a great job of like expanding on that idea in ways that I wouldn't have anticipated. So that's how it looks for us currently.
Cody, how about you? Have you ever noticed any friction between like what the job description reads and actually getting that person to do the day-to-day work?
I think usually, yeah. I mean, I think usually that comes from just like the leader or hiring manager not being super clear on what the role is needed. And I think that's a normal thing. I mean, success, I think, comes from being really clear about what's needed and being able to communicate those expectations. But I think, like I've totally hired people and I'm like, that wasn't exactly what we needed at the time. Obviously, it's just something you learn from experience. But I think that's it. What about you?
Yeah, I think, for the most part, I mean, all of our within growth, our marketers are, they have been hands on keyboard. If they're not still, they have been. So that hasn't really been an issue. And I think the expectation of, this expectation to me is absolutely critical. Where I think people go wrong is they have the job description, maybe they outline some like key projects or key results, and then they kind of just like hand it off to the person they just hired, and they're like expect that thing just to come to life. And that like just doesn't happen. Actually, hiring someone's more work up front, and it's less work once that person gets up to speed. So I think you have to take that 10-80-10 principle into hiring, or at least I do, where like we just hired a CRO lead. I spent actually an enhanced amount of time on CRO in the first 30 days of hiring that person because I wanted to get them up to speed. I wanted to get them downloaded on everything. I wanted them to understand where I think the opportunity was without skewing their view on what the opportunity was, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. But that hasn't been a problem because I have that expectation. And anytime the team comes to me and says, hey, I'm like so stretched at bandwidth, I need a hire to take on A, B, and C, I say, great, let's go make that business case. But just, like, I think it is going to be more work for you in the first 30 days until that person gets up to speed. So I think as long as you have that approach going into it, it's okay and it usually works out. But I just think a lot of people are like, oh, from day one, this person's going to take all this work off my plate or provide all this value in this way or really attack this project we're not currently attacking. So as long as you're not going into it with that approach, I think you're generally going to be in a good spot. But have you guys seen that too, where people aren't necessarily, they don't have that expectation that's actually a little bit more work to get this person momentum?
Totally. And that's what's so painful sometimes. You're like, oh, I gotta hire this person to save me time. And then the first 45 days, it actually required way more time.
Right.
Especially from like junior people who haven't done it before.
Right.
Totally. And that's like, we're thinking about some influencer manager hires right now. And on paper, it's like, man, we really want them to oversee like a few key things. It's not that complicated. But then you think about, like you talked about Agenteo earlier, Cody, and about the communication. That is the biggest most time consuming part of influencer marketing, whether you're doing product seeding or brand ambassador deals or ad sourcing. Is just like so much negotiating and communication happening between every individual creator. And if there's a manager involved, it's even more communication. So I think it's just about setting those expectations. And, we're able to see like 2-3 steps ahead now when it comes to that and be like, all right, we're only asking them to take on these 2 core competencies, but let's actually break it down and outline exactly what that means and how much time that's going to take. So I think we're getting better at it over time. We've never had any horror stories where like we fired someone within the first 2 months of hiring them. That's never happened, but I think it's certainly something you get better at over time. But I think that's a good segue. I wanted to talk about how do you get the initial momentum from a new hire. So whenever we hire someone, my goal is to kind of get them into our quarterly key result and initiative like pace. Like that's ultimately what everyone does at our org is you have key results and initiatives on a quarterly basis that you are like, that's your North Star. Like those are the things you're working towards. Those are the projects you're working on. So my goal is always to think about how can I get this person into that workflow as soon as possible? Because if they're in that workflow, then that means that they are, producing value for our company. So there's obviously that middle ground between, all right, day one and, however many days it takes them to get into that workflow. What does that look like for you, Cody, when you make a new hire? Like, how are you getting them up to speed as quickly as possible?
It's a good question. So I think in general, like expectation setting is probably the biggest thing. I think the biggest part of, again, all of this is just learning where I've been wrong in the past, but it's just, hey, here are the expectations. This is the expectations for the role. This is because there's so much when you're getting onboarded into a new role, you're getting everything thrown at you. New systems, new culture, new commute, new ways of doing things, right? Like new team members. And so there's so much. So A, you just have to repeat stuff over and over and over is what I've learned. But B, you have to like really like strip the signal from the noise and just be like, this is what's important. This is your expectation. Here is how I will evaluate whether you're doing a good job in your role, both in A, like long-term, like when you're onboarded, and then also like, I don't know if you guys do a 30, 60, 90, but that's something that we will do. So what our director of HR will set up all the meetings ahead of time that they need to have with everybody, in their first few weeks, but just here's your 30, 60, 90. Here's what I expect you to get done in the first 30 days, 60, 90. I would say 90 to me is like onboarding is done. I feel like your question was about like, what do you do to get them up to speed as quickly as possible? I think it's hard, especially in a startup, because you need them to get up to speed as quickly as possible. But I think you also have to go slow. And if you ask people to jump in too quickly, they're probably not going to have enough of the context and the backstory and the culture of the company that they might, it might not go as smoothly. So when possible, I try to go as slow as possible and kind of take the pressure off. And I'll just tell people, hey, like, I don't want you coming in here hot. I don't want you, feeling like you have to prove anything. I hired you because I trust you and I know you're going to be great. But I'd rather you kind of just sit back, build relationships, build trust, and do a big audit. And then like, when you're ready, we'll attack it. I think for most roles, that's great. We just hired this new creative strategist and like, she's kind of taking her time, which I want her to do. In the background, I'm like, I can't, like, we need ads right now. I can't wait to get her in. So there's some stuff you kind of have to take people aside and be like, hey, like this stuff publicly facing with the rest of the team, like, I don't want you coming in hot, go slow. But like, in the meantime, you and I are going to work on stuff and like, we're going to have to throw you in some stuff. So I think it depends, but just being very clear about those expectations would be short answer for it.
100%. Yeah. Connor, how about you? What's your approach?
Well, actually, I have a question for Cody. Do you guys I imagine you do something like this, but like maybe you have an example of the performance creative person. Do they spend time like you guys work in person? So like are there meetings? Are there one-on-one setups? So they're meeting the whole team? Are they working with remote employees? Like how do you do that like more general, like, hey, just get acquainted with everyone?
Yeah, for sure. So that's what our director of people sets up. So whoever the hiring manager is, if it's me and they're reporting to, she'll just be like, hey, like what's the order of priority? Who should they be chatting with?
Right.
And some of them are just very general, just, hey, I'm just getting to know you. A lot of times, like, because we're in person, people just go out to get coffee for their 30-minute meeting. So some of it is, yeah, like our director, senior director of creative strategy, she met with director of growth, multiple times. We had a departing creative strategist, so obviously met with her to get, offboarded. Our like marketing ops person that kind of does project management, right? Met with them. And part of it is just, hey, getting to know you. Like part of it is just getting to know people, building relationships. Part of it is learning who does what people's roles are. And then some people, like our director of ecom who joined, or our director of retention, I specifically asked them, I was like, hey, any tips that you have? You did a great job getting up to speed. You did a great, right? You kind of just went through it. It's fresh in your mind. Like, please give her any tips that you have when you meet about fitting into the culture here, anything that you've learned and onboarding. So it's kind of a mix of very specific, like, hey, meeting with the director of growth, here's exactly how we do media buying. Here's our creative process currently. Some of it is more general onboarding tips. And some of it is just, hey, I'm going to meet with our COO and I just have to get to know you.
Right.
And that's probably over the course of like the first month. A lot of that happens in the first month.
Totally. Yeah.
Do you guys do something similar remote or not as much?
Yeah, we do it remote, which is fun. Which is funny. Like, do one-on-ones remotely. You just like you jump on Google Meets or whatever. But yeah, that's a key piece. And I think there's this just kind of like it's less pointed, right? Like it's less. All of this conversation can have an aspect of like, okay, well, how are we going to work together? What do you need from me? Like, what can I utilize from your team, et cetera, et cetera. But like, really, it's just like, hey, let's create, especially in a remote environment, let's just create touch points with people so you feel a part of the culture. So that feels like very, non-pointed. When it becomes more like directional, like how are we getting someone acquainted with the role and responsibilities? This is kind of the point that I just hit on, talking about like minimum viable responsibilities. But we brought on a new designer who's largely going to handle e-com design. And he came on in October or something. And actually, there's two things. There's one that I talk about all the time. I have 2 key meetings a week, marketing all hands, and we have our go-to-market review. We have like top-down updates. We review performance, go-to-market bottoms up. Like, let's all talk about the thing that we're just about to launch. So they get involved with those, and that's a great way to be like, look, you pay attention in these meetings for a couple of weeks. You'll understand where we're at from a business perspective. You'll hear from all the channel leaders on the go-to-market calls to understand our strategy launching these new things. So that is like a very general way to get acquainted with marketing. In case of e-com, I think there's 3 pieces. There is basically what Slack channels are important to you, and which I also think is interesting in a remote environment. We've come across the scenario where people are like overwhelmed almost. I don't think our Slack etiquette is great, frankly. Too many channels, too many messages, like people will just kind of get lost. So it's like, hey, these are the 3 or 4 or 5 channels that are like essential for you. Stay up to date. Make sure you understand what people are saying here. What meetings are important to you? So when are we doing like e-com creative reviews? And then Notion is, where are we tracking all of our tasks? Where are you seeing the briefs? So between those 3 things, you should be able to like quickly get traction in the role that we want you to be in. And that exists whether or not there was someone in that role previously. And I found that to be really helpful. And then you can begin, if someone's succeeding in the role, they're quickly picking up momentum from there.
Do you have any of that stuff like recorded? Because I feel like we do that. We'll have a person take them through those things every time. But like theoretically, like our project management, somebody can just do a loom and have it be done once and just give that to everybody that gets onboarded.
We have a lot of. I haven't done the onboarding in a long time, but yeah, we have a lot of looms. We have a lot of Notion docs to like review. We have a I forget what. Oh, it's like a channel directory. Do you understand what all the key channels are and what's being discussed there? I still think it's I still think it's always worth talking through. Like it's definitely not like automated. Completely at least.
It's interesting that. And like we've developed this over time, and I don't even see it now because like we'll have all right, here's like the growth team onboarding, but also like the first 2 days, like I'm not even talking to you because you're with HR and you're like running through the HR pantry, which, they have their kind of list of resources that everything you need to know. Like, here's our policies, here's our org chart, here's this, and that. Same thing with PMO. Like, we hired a director of PMO last year, and I think we have 2 or 3 full-time hires under her now. And we like,
what is PMO?
Project management organization. We totally like ripped our project management system down and built it back up. So now we use ClickUp, and they have their own onboarding process as well with like, all right, here's how we assign tasks. Here's like how you have your dashboard set up to know like what's required of you and what's not required of you. And that's all outside of growth team. So it's been cool to see those things come together over time. And then it sounds like we all do something fairly similar. I've started making these like download documents where it's just like, hey, if you like understand all the information on this, you're going to be in a really, really good spot. And that should really be your focus. So like we basically organize it by people to meet, like broken out by team. And then we'll go into like area of focus. So we just hired the CRO lead, and this is one of those things where it was like a joint committee, like myself, our head of website, some agency partners, some freelance partners, really driving CRO forward. So it's like, here's like the area of focus testing wise, like here's where I think we have opportunity. It's like, hey, our product category flow and breadcrumbs aren't that great. I think we could improve there. Hey, we have all these opportunities on the product pages. I think we could like update our accordion information. I think we could add a technology section improvement, like stuff like that. So we have like the actual strategic download, the operational download. So I'm like saying, hey, here's how you and I will work together. Here's like some operation-based things that we need to get better at, right? Like we need to figure out like what's the workflow between you, because CRO's on growth team, but like web's on a different team. So like what's that workflow going to be between you and design and dev? Then I'm going through resources. Like here's what we have for development, resources, copy resources, design resources, production resources. Go through tooling. We use convert.com, Intelligence Replo, all, Edge Mesh, Clarity for, here's the tooling stack. And then I'm like, here's the focus from day one. So like go through this, read through these things. And then I'll generally have like a final deliverable that is pre them going into our just always on quarterly, like key result initiative setting. So for this role, it was like, hey, your final thing to do is create a roadmap, right? Like you now have my download, you're going to do your own audit, like separate from my download. Your like final deliverable here is to create a roadmap and like what the opportunity is. And then we can actually take that and build that into our evergreen quarterly goal setting exercise. So like there is always like one final thing that this person's trying to get to, which is kind of like to me the signal of, all right, you're ready to get into some final workflow here to actually start producing for us in our always on, the same way that every member of our growth team is. But before, like we didn't do this like consolidated document, and they were just like trying to grab these things from all these different places. And I found that just spending like an hour or 2 hours putting together like a really robust document is really, really helpful. It can like, it seems like a no duh, but these things become so natural to you in your role after you get familiar with the company that it's nice just to put it down in a single sheet and give it all to them in the same place. If you want to hit next level growth, you need to move away from correlation-based measurement and move towards causality. There is no better way to test your channels, your levels of diminishing return, certain tactics within a channel than using a geo-based incrementality testing tool. And that's exactly what House is. That is exactly why all three of us use House. House is a self-serve experimentation platform that allows you to configure regional test and control experiments to measure incrementality and identify points of diminishing returns. House is really it's the most controlled, the most scientifically sound way to do any sort of marketing testing and experimentation. These things are very, very hard to set up on your own. It's rigorous. If you have one little variable messed up, all of a sudden your data is not trustworthy. That's why House is such a valuable partner. All you need to do is go into your ad accounts and add exclusion or exclusion lists, run the data or run the test. And not only do they set up the test for you, but they also help you interpret all the results. So they're handling experimentation design and experiment analysis, and also even going as far as helping you make sense of what to do based on that data. And we at HexClad have gotten some insane insights this year from all of our House holdout tests. So our core strategy this year has been doing channel level holdouts to really see which channels are driving the best and most efficient cost per incremental order. So we've tested YouTube, Meta, Google PMax, TikTok. We're now testing AppLovin. We are getting a sense of which channels are driving the most incrementally efficient first-time orders right now. And the amount of insights that come from that information is insane. It helps us inform where we develop creative. It helps us inform where we scale up budgets in certain channels and bring certain budgets down. Plus, we are now able to use our incrementality results and actually plug it right into Prescient. So not only are we getting causal data, that is actual data that we can trust to make decisions off of, but now the media mix models and the probabilistic data from Prescient is even more accurate because they're using actual data to inform their models and the readouts that they're giving us. House is an essential addition to your measurement stack. Go to house.io/operators. That is spelled HAUS.io/operators to start your incrementality practice today. But I wanted to transition into the last thing I just said and ask your guys' opinion. I think it's when you're hiring someone to take on, especially when they're like overseeing a part of the business that maybe you were overseeing, at least in some part. I think the last thing you want to do is like force your thoughts onto them. Like, I don't want to go to this new CRO hire and like force what I see as the big opportunity down their throat. It's like, no, we need to go focus on like new accordion section information. Like, I want them to come up with their own thoughts through their audit. And then I want to talk about it and compare and contrast. Have you guys, what are your thoughts on that? Like, you hire someone to do something, you have a lot of opinions and thoughts on what should be done, but you want to lean on their unique creativity and zone of genius and not force your thoughts down their throat. Like, do you agree with that? Do you have any tactics or like strategies to like find that balance, or how do you approach that?
I think I mean, depending on the role, but you should be fostering a sense of like collaboration. So there's striking a balance between like, hey, look, I'm pretty sure I've been here 8 years, or I've been here 4.5 years. Like, I'm pretty sure this should be the focus. But you definitely don't want to get into the mode of like being prescriptive. That's not what you hired them to do, especially if they are, director or senior director level. So that's at least how I've approached it. I brought up the creative direction or the creative director role earlier, where I was like, look, these are directionally where I think we could immediately benefit, but then really leaving like 40, 50, 60% of like the objectives for them to help define. Because ultimately, especially with creative direction, I'm like, from the very beginning, I do not know how to do this role better than you. We hired you for your expertise. So like, let's kind of build the roadmap together. So it's about striking that balance. And then I think it comes down to like, I think a big piece of that can also be just setting general objectives. Like, not like, hey, you need to do 1, 2, 3 things. It is like, hey, we need to achieve this. Now let's talk about what do we think are the ways to get us there. That can be collaborative. You can end up pushing through what you think is the best way to reach the ultimate objective. But I think that's helpful also, like keeping people oriented around the higher level thing you want to achieve.
Right. Yes. So in my example, it's like, hey, we need to improve our product breadcrumbs. There's 20 ways we could do that. We could adjust the navigation. We could adjust the way we use filters on the collection page. We could even add some like category sections on the homepage. Like, that's why we hired you, right? To decide how do we go and improve our product breadcrumb flow. Do you have any specific examples, Connor, with your?
But even that, I mean, that almost sounds. Well, I guess when you say breadcrumbs, do you mean like site hierarchy? Because breadcrumbs sounds a little specific. It's like, hey, we want to improve the way that people can navigate our site.
Yeah, I guess I would. Yes, that's probably not, because breadcrumbs is the actual like, how do you like backspace, forward space, right? From different. Yeah. So I would say, yes, site hierarchy would probably be a better more general direction. That's not too specific to the tactic.
Yeah, totally. That's a great one.
I don't want to improve our site hierarchy, but you could even start with the problem. Like, it's clear that we need to improve as our product line grows. We need to improve, the site's functionality, or we need to like almost phrase it more on the user. Like, we need to help users find these things better.
Right.
Kind of give them the problem and then let them come to you with the solution.
Yes. It's like, our product categories are not discoverable enough, period. Like, how do we solve that? And then that's what you're pushing on to your new hire to go and figure out, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you an example, like what if you have an example, Connor, with this new hire you just made, like some of the bigger picture objective or like high level pieces that you're like, because you said this person's mainly for ecom design, so like web experience, or is this a different?
Yeah. The designer's kind of like manager level, so it's not like super strategic. It is more like they more have a system that we just needed additional bandwidth for, so they are plugging in and like better executing there. The creative director and the VP of marketing are going to be better examples of things where I'm laying out high level objectives and then we're collaboratively identifying the focuses from there. And yeah, the best example for the creative director would be like, we want to improve the content pipeline. We want to be producing more creative that's more valuable across all of our different channels. What are the ways to do that? Making studio more efficient was one, bringing in external partners, and I forget. We had like a couple more there, but like that was a very collaborative process. And another example is like, I actually had 2 goals, right? Improving the content pipeline, 2, improving design cohesion. No, thank you. Sorry. No, that's okay. It's housekeeping.
No, that was Sean saying, Connor, are you ready to go to the craps table?
I had 2 goals, right? Improve content pipeline, like content production, and then like improve basically design cohesiveness. And ultimately, like the creative director came in and said, I need to spend more time in the short term on content production and almost creating that order of operations. And like we sign off on that together. Let's build out the content production system. Once that system is built and can maintain itself to some degree, we have more time and energy to spend with the design team. So that's an example of like what my goals were and how they were kind of like refined as this person onboarded over the first 60 days.
Yeah. Cody, do you have any additional thoughts on how to approach that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'll just give an example because I just hired the new creative strategist, but I totally agree with Connor. I mean, ideally, you're doing this as part of the recruitment process, especially for these more senior roles where like you can take your time and like, you know, Connor or I might hire a person because we have this vision for where what the problems are and kind of where we want our team to go in. And we want to be very clear about that during the recruitment process of, you know, if it's streamlining things or doing things like that, like you want to make sure those visions align because you don't want the person to come in and thinking it's going to go one way and you don't have the same, you know, vision. So especially senior roles, like I'm a little bit more like conversational about the recruitment process and just like making sure that those goals are aligned. And overall agree with everything he said. It's very collaborative. What I do is I think part of my onboarding, because I'm not doing at this point the X's and O's. I'm not showing them even how we do paid social or how we, you know, our content calendar or our project management stuff, right? Other people are doing it. So really mine is a little bit more on the vision and then the backstory, because I've been here from the beginning. Hey, this is what our creative strategy has been from beginning of the launch, beginning of the brand until now. Here are the different inflection points where I think we struggled or cracked something. You know, here's where we've been. Here is where I think we should go, or here's where I think we need to go. Just like as much context, you know, giving them as much context as possible, and certainly giving them some ideas. And then they work on kind of an audit at a senior level role. So like this happened for our director of ecom, where showed her everything we've tested on our site and things like that. And then over time, she dove into the data, and maybe at the 3-week point, you know, she gave me an audit, which was like a potential roadmap. These are all the things I think we could test. This is users aren't finding this. And then kind of her and I just aligning on the priorities of them, right? This is, hey, I think we should do this one first. Like I'm very, very collaborative, maybe a little bit more founder mode. So I'm not going to just be like, yes, do it all. Like, but I think you should give them a direction. So like tomorrow we hired the creative strategist 2.5 weeks ago. So tomorrow will be, you know, start of our 3rd week. I can't wait. I'm not patient. She's kind of sitting me down and kind of giving me like her audit and proposal kind of. So it's like, hey, here is where things are currently at. Here's what I think is doing well. Here's what I think is not. Here's what I think we need to do. Here's what resources I would need, you know? And so it might be, you know, and again, she's very experienced. She's a senior director. She's been at one of the big agencies everybody knows. So like she knows what she's doing. I'm not going to sit a coordinator down and be like, hey, give me an audit of everything you think we should do. So it's very level and role dependent. But yeah, so I will just give her feedback on it. Hey, this is what I love. Totally agree with this. Part of the reason I don't want somebody doing this too soon, as Connor alluded to, is like there's so much context. Like I don't want somebody coming in on first day being like, have you tested this? And maybe we've tested this like 8 times over the year. So I don't want them doing it too soon. But yeah, so they'll kind of do that. Best case scenario, I sign off. I'm like, I love this. What resources do you need? Granted, but usually it's pretty good. And then I'm just like, hey, totally agree with that. That component, maybe I agree with you. It's biting off a little bit more than we can right now. Let's put a pause on it. Let's go a little bit longer term. But this is what we're going to get started on, immediately. This is what I can give you. Like, this is what support I can give you for it. So hopefully I'll let you guys know how it goes. But that's, I think, the plan for some of these senior level roles is it's kind of that 10-80-10, very collaborative approach.
I think you make a really good point around, like, especially as someone who's been there from the very beginning, just like instilling that knowledge of like what has worked, what hasn't. What also comes to mind for me is like, I mentioned, I think in the last episode, we hired the customer experience director. Me just saying where I knew the blind spots were, right? Like known unknowns. I'm like, look, CX started reporting into me midway through last year. I'm like, I do not know about like this part of the team. So like, this is where you should focus. If we want to talk about tools and some of the decisions made there and like historical processes, this is where I can provide insight. But like, let's identify the known unknowns and let them drill in there early on to like really, if there are inefficiencies or things to improve, then we kind of start there. So I found that to be helpful as well as just like making that distinction.
Yeah, I like that as well. I think that's great. And you can't, we're hopefully at the size where like we're all hiring subject matter experts. So I think everyone has to be willing to say like, honestly, I don't know. Like, I want you to tell me like, this is what I think, but like, to be humble enough, if you're hiring director of CX or creative strategy, like I want you to tell me. But I do think like, obviously you have to be collaborative and you're hiring these people because you want a director or, you want somebody who knows what they're doing and is going to lead this thing. But you also have to make sure it aligns with your vision. I don't think you can just like hire somebody and be like, hey, tell me what to do. For example, like you might hire a director of CX and you really want to reduce your CX headcount and implement AI, And I think if you didn't tell them that and you were just like, hey, tell me what you think we should do with our CX department. They're like, all right, great. I need to hire 20 people. You're like, well, that's not what we're trying to do. So I do think you have to give them like the context and like the business outcome and give them like the what. Maybe they give you the how, but you got to at least give them like what their initiative is.
Totally.
I think something I'm gleaning from your process, and I think we do the same, is you need to give them all the context, but then you're giving them the opportunity to pitch you. Like you're not pitching them and having them say yes, no. They're pitching you as their manager, and then you're saying, "Yep, agree with this. Nope, don't agree with that. Hey, I have some thoughts on this." Which I think is the perfect balance, I think, in terms of like hiring a subject matter expert to level up a part of the org and like having you weigh in with your, unique level of experience that only you have. And really, it's no different for we treat our quarterly key result and initiative planning the same way, where, I'm giving the team context in like where I think the approach should be headed into the quarter, but then they're basically coming to me and saying, hey, here are all the key initiatives and the key results that I think we should be focused on and that I and my team should be held accountable for. And then it's the same thing. I'm giving them feedback and saying, all right, agree with these 8, but don't agree with number 9. Think you're missing 2 that we should add in. And then it just like, it empowers your team to really guide that strategy forward, which I think is really, really useful. And then we do that every quarter. So every quarter, like everyone on my team's like kind of not, pitching me basically kind of their focus for the quarter. And it's worked out pretty well. It's, everyone's very much marching in the same direction when we do it that way.
I like the term pitch because they are pitching us on it. And I also think it's same thing where like, and this is not even an onboarding thing, but just a general management thing. Like I'm also pitching them on things. Like I'm not going to tell my director of CX like what software they have to, like when we were using Gorgeous when she came on, and this was about the time I was starting to look into Rich Panel, but I'm not going to tell her like, hey, we're switching to this. Like I need you to switch. But I was like, hey, this thing looks great. My friends at Ridge just switched, like check it out. And she had done a demo before. And I was like, hey, I think it would help for these reasons, better AI, better cost, stuff like that. But can you take a demo? I'll ask her to take a demo, but same thing. So I think you kind of have to pitch each other both ways. And I think what Connor said, it's just got to be collaborative. I think as a leader, you just have to give them the expectations and like what their goal is, whether that's like very specific KPIs or not. You got to give them the right resources, but yeah, you got to let them kind of tell you how they're going to get there. It's been really cool to see Prescient this year just emerge as one of the leading, trusting solutions for brands to measure their media mix. Now more than ever, triangulation, having no source of truth, but really it's best practice to have multiple methods to be able to figure out, what is performing. And one of the things that we love in our toolbox is Prescient. But it's been really cool to see a lot of brands onboarding with them and having a lot of success. Onboarding is super quick. It's the quickest I've ever seen from an MMM. It's been great for our upper funnel channels. Things like TV and YouTube has really given us confidence, and it's very hard to validate and test TV. So they have great integrations. We use Tatari for all our TV buying. And so it's the best way where we're able to understand how our upper funnel channels are working. We're not on Amazon, but if you're on Amazon, you can get really cool halo sales impacts of Amazon as well as retail channels. So it's awesome. You can forecast revenue and acquisition costs across all your channels, optimize your media mix to improve your profitability. They've always got new channels coming, which is really cool. It's really played a really big role in us scaling and having the confidence to increase our spend in things like TV, both linear and streaming and YouTube as well. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. So there's a reason why Prescient is trusted by Jones Road Beauty, Hexclad, Hollow Socks, Coterie, and over 100 more. And so if you want to be like one of us, like Jones Road, like Connor from Hexclad, check out Prescient, which I highly recommend you should. Go to prescientai.com/operators to book a demo and see for yourself.
Here, I've got a tweet draft that's related to this. We could workshop it right now. You guys ready?
This is called Moperators live tweeting.
Go for it.
Yeah. No, because Cody, what you just said, I think is really, and I see this happening within Ridge at different times, and it has to happen other places. But this idea that you're pitching them, like what you're saying there is like you don't want to be prescriptive. You don't just want to tell them what to do and for them to do it. Like one, I think there's value in like them truly believing that whatever it is you're doing, switching to Rich Panel is helping them achieve their goal. Like you want them to be bought in, but then also you don't want them to like feel as if they are succeeding in their job if they're just doing the things that you tell them to do. So what I have here is, this is really half-baked. The secret slow death of an organization is when a manager just wants to be listened to, an employee that wants to do what they're told, and an employee that just wants to do what they're told. Both parties think they're doing a good job, but there's no new ideas, et cetera, et cetera. You can understand the downsides of that. Half-baked tweet, but like I think that happens constantly. You have managers that want to be prescriptive, or even you could have executives that just want to be prescriptive, and then directors who just want to do what they're told. And that just feels like really detrimental because, like I said, it can give the appearance of good work. Both people are basically doing what they want, but like nobody's actually bought into the ultimate objectives. Nobody's held to like the results of the business. So you guys think I'm onto something there?
I absolutely do. And I think if you have a director that, and one of the notes I had here was like director head versus manager coordinator and how you handle each. Because I think in your scenario, Connor, where that director level just wants to be told what to do, they're not really a director. They're at that point a manager coordinator, I think. Because I think there are certain times where you really do need to hire someone to come in and just like do the thing that's already established, which is generally more of like a manager coordinator level role. So for example, like we've really developed our paid media creative flywheel and process around that. And we hired, like I've said this in past episodes, like me, Cam, London really laid that foundation in 2022, 2023. Then we hired this director role to come in and like really focus on it, level it up, continue to scale it. So now we're hiring for more creative strategists, and they're going to be manager coordinator level. I don't need them to come in necessarily and like innovate in this area as much as I need them to come in and like help us with our output. And like I need them to plug into the existing, and not that they won't have the ability to be like, hey, I think we should improve it here or there or by this way. They will, but less of that compared to like, hey, director of paid media creative, here's what we got now. Here's the outcomes I'm looking for. Like we need to do more volume at higher quality, like go innovate and do with that what you will to achieve those things. So I think it's a different approach with it, whether it's like a director head versus a manager coordinator and like what the needs are for the business.
100%. And I guess in my example, I totally agree. Like at some point, somebody just has to be doing work that like someone else has laid out. But it can become more detrimental, especially as it moves up the organization. I do think there are examples of not even someone not necessarily being a like director quality, Like, it's not as if they necessarily can't lay out strategy, but they are coached in a way, or like they are given direction in a way where they feel success in their role is just doing what they're told, and like accepting that prescriptive strategy, I think is like, it's just a really slippery slope.
Yeah, I think at a lower level, it should be prescriptive as people get above that level. But yeah, no, I think it's doing it all the time. I have a 2.5-year-old toddler. I can't prescribe anything. She picks what she wants to wear. You know what I mean? I can't say this is what you're wearing today. I have to be very thoughtful and persuasive about how I position things. Almost nothing I ask is, do you want to do this? It's, which one of these do you want? Pretty much everything. But I think it's the same thing at work as well. Like, I might think that this is what we want to do. Like, for example, and especially with our network and stuff, right? We'll see a lot of things. We'll get access to, different softwares, agencies, stuff like that. But I'm not just going to bring somebody in and be like, we're going with them. I'm going to, like Agenteo, I was like, hey, I saw this. Let's hop on a demo. What do you think? Talked about it with my director of growth. We were like, I don't know right now. It seems interesting. Let's hold off. Like, we came to that decision together, if I felt strongly we should do it, like I'll push back, but I also have to say it's his department. Like, if he doesn't want to, like, that's fine. But there are certainly things where like I think are best, and maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I just need to get them to come around to it and kind of have it be their own idea. So I just have to try to guide them, but ultimately I got to let them decide. As long as, I don't think they're exactly off, but then if you're not trusting your directors to make those decisions, like, there's a bigger problem.
Yeah. It also slows you down in a healthy way. Like, if your approach is that, like, if you, Cody, have an idea about what to do in paid media creative, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go pitch this to this person and like try to get their buy-in, and vice versa. Like, they have to pitch you if they have an idea. Like, I think it slows you down in a healthy way. It's healthy to have that dialogue and to like basically straw man ideas, because I think it's so easy to like get an idea and want to like act on it right away. And if you just slow down and like you build in these sort of like processes, like I have to pitch and get buy-in, they have to pitch and get buy-in. It slows you down and maybe it would like stop you from acting on something too soon that you shouldn't act on. But B, it probably helps you if you do ultimately decide to go forward with the project. If anything, you're just going to be going about it in a more detail oriented way. It's like, all right, not only are we going to go attack Agenteo right now, but we also just uncovered like 3 different strategic points that we would not have covered if I would have just like forced this on their throat versus me pitching them and like having them actually like poke holes in it. So you're actually probably going about it in a more calculated way. So I think that's a really healthy thing and a really healthy culture to have in an organization.
Yeah, you got to have that culture. Hopefully, where you can kind of attack ideas, and not everyone's going to be the same. Like, I know certain directors have to be a little bit more intelligent about it, and I can't push things as hard, and I have to go a little bit slower.
Yeah,
but, yeah, agreed.
So the last piece I have here is, I'm curious now, like, once someone is, so our CRO lead, we hired him at the end of September. I would say about halfway through the quarter, he really kind of got into like the evergreen workflow of like, here's the projects I want you focused on. Here are some key results for you to hit. Like, his were basically like hit rate in the CRO test, like a percentage of tests that had a positive impact on whatever metric that we were going after improving, which is typically revenue per user, conversion rate. So now he's in the evergreen workflow of our what we use is like our quarterly key results and initiative setting. What are you like with your design director or your director of paid media creative? Like, what are you ultimately trying to get them into? Like, do you guys have like a standard process for how you set expectations on the key projects they're working on and like the key results that they're held accountable to?
Yeah.
Like, I like having a single source of truth that I can come back to, where it's like one single Google sheet with everyone on the growth team in it. Like, here's everything. If you look at this Google sheet, you will know exactly what everyone's focused on. Because I think some people do it in an, like, not that you have to do it that way. I know some people just prefer to talk and like they know the 4 things, but I like having it written down in a single spot. Yeah. That's just how my brain works.
Yeah, no, it's way better to write it down. I'm not the best at writing it down. There's really 2 places where that information lives. I have a like 2025 like key channel initiatives doc where I'm just like, I've got each team there, and I put it together like over the holidays when I was just like thinking through everything and like, okay, writing it down. Some of those will become, I'll give a couple examples. So I've got that, which is mostly just for me. And then I'll put that into like one-on-one documents that I have with all direct reports. So at the top, creative director has our 30, 60, 90 plan, and then it'll become our just like ongoing kind of key projects and initiatives. I also, in the case of the partnerships, which I mentioned, we parted ways with the director and we're kind of reorging that team. I basically redid their job descriptions, but with the focus on 2025. This is what I expect to see from both managers, and then they're bringing that to life with the overseas staff that report into them. So it's an example of like, yeah, I totally agree. It's better to get it written down. It can kind of live in a couple different places depending on the team member or, the meeting cadence with certain people. So that's how we've done it. And then the last thing that I'll say that I've struggled with and is really a big part of the VP of marketing role is so much of our time has been going to our go-to-market launches. Like we have a fully ramped product development team. We've got weekly launches basically. So how do we balance like the ongoing responsibilities of doing that better and better over time, as well as identifying like areas of opportunity outside of that, whether from a process standpoint or a performance standpoint? Like how are we balancing all of those things together? So that's what I've been working through with the team as well.
Cody, how about you? How are you outlining those expectations?
Yeah. So one thing we're trying to figure out just across the org is like KPIs goals. It's not something we've really done a ton of. We've really just had company goals. And I think just like even tying it to, I think we want to do a better job of like just overall performance management and tying it to compensation, making those conversations easier at the end of the year. And I think being more fair and equitable with compensation would be better, because right now it's really just based on how the company does, but I don't think that's fair to the top performers. Like there's not a big enough split in bonus between the top performers and bottom.
Yeah.
So we want to get a little bit more, but I think to do that, you have to be objective. So overall, we're looking at the company and how we do goals and KPIs and making more objective, but also not trying to make it too corporate. And, like we're still a startup. So we are doing a similar kind of, we're calling it Big Rocks, but to what Rich does for Cornerstone. So like, that's kind of easy. If somebody has one that aligns, like that's really easy to be like, hey, we need to improve our creative diversity. Like, that's our big goal. That's kind of like our objective. Here's our key results. Where they don't have it, it's harder. So I would say we're in the process of really doing that and trying to figure it out and getting a little bit more objective with, director of ecom. Here are the number of tests I want you to do per month and things like that.
Yeah.
Right. Because right now it's just, we want to test more, but it's not as objective and pinpointed. And then, we have a weekly marketing meeting where everyone shares what they're working on their channel, how they're doing against their goals, what support, is needed, why they think they're below, if they are. And then I do a weekly stand-up with almost everybody that reports to me. That's just same thing. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what the past week was. If I'm below, this is why. Here's what support I need. And then that's kind of where we will reprioritize things if needed. Like, hey, here's what I'm working on. Which 3 do you want me to work on? Stuff like that.
Yep. I like that. I think it's one of those things where just something's better than nothing. You don't have to have it super dialed in, but like when you have nothing, I think some people like goal setting is one of those things where you can just go down such a rabbit hole with like the actual like operations and tactics to do it. It's like, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than just things written in a Google document that everyone agrees on as the source of truth. Like even that is better than, there's people out there. There are like, I'm not saying you shouldn't do the complicated, more convoluted stuff if that works for you. But like for us, it's, we're similar to you, Connor, where at the beginning of the year, end of the last year, beginning of this year, I'll make a big document by channel that has all the key like projects that I think should be the focus for the year. Everyone agrees on that. Once that happens, then that naturally turns into the quarterly key results and initiatives, which are basically just the subcomponent parts of those bigger year-long projects. And like, that's it. And not that we don't adjust it, we do, but like we keep coming back to that as our source of truth to make sure that we are actually pacing on, on track with what we said at the beginning of the year. And I'm going to hit you guys up about your weekly stand-ups, because that's something that we were doing and then got away from them because we got busy. And I want to come back to it because I think that's I think it's a nice thing to do at the beginning of the week to make sure that everyone's prioritized on the right stuff. And I think there's a lot of value for like cross-departmental teams knowing what the other team's working on. I think otherwise, especially in a remote setting, I think it's too easy for like paid media, to lose, not understand what retention's working on, not understand what influencer's working on. And like, I think when you hear those other people say what they're working on, you can kind of connect the dots to the bigger picture a lot easier. And to do it in a regular way, I think is just net a good thing. Even if you as the leader are like, this is redundant information for me, I don't need this, but I think the team does. So we're trying to get back into that. So I might ask you about your setups for those calls.
For sure.
All right. That is a wrap on part 2 of the 2-part hiring series on the marketing operators. Really interesting episode. I think me, Cody, and Connor all have, slightly different ways of achieving the same thing. So, take what you want, leave what you want. Thank you to the sponsors, Motion, Prescient, Rich Panel, and House. As always, if you're liking the show, please make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment with your question, share with some other marketers. We're trying to get this thing in the hands with as many e-commerce and just overall marketing strategists and button pushers as possible.